All right, fresh off the project. Hopefully everything was successful. We're going to be going back to a tutorial view. And I would encourage you to do the same thing that I'm going to be doing, where we're going to be creating a new create React application. And the reason for that is very simple because in this case, we're not going to be deleting as brutally as we were in the beginning. And I think it's just going to make a little bit more sense. Technically, you could work in the same old folder, but I think it's just going to be easier if you're going to follow along and do things exactly like I am doing. And first things first, I would like to navigate to a desktop. Then once I'm going to be in desktop, I'm gonna create a new folder. I'm going to say create React app, and I don't know, we can call this maybe tutorial, I don't know, second or something like this. And then in this case, we're going to be creating a new folder. Again, this might take a while, so I'm going to resume the video once all the dependencies have been installed. Nice. We have our application. So why don't I open up my text editor and then I'm just going to drag and drop it here, as well as I would like to right away have my browser window. So I'm going to say new window. Then this is going to be way too big for me right now. So let me make this one bigger or big. And then I'm going to open up my integrated terminal. Here I'm going to run npm start. So that's going to bootstrap our application. Now I can make this a little bit smaller. And now this is going to be starting there. So that's not what I wanted. So let's say I would want them side by side. That would be my first action. Now, once I have them side by side, I will going to leave this open a little bit, the sidebar, just so I can explain a little bit better of what we're doing. And then we're going to head over and I'm just going to close the terminal because I'm not going to use it right now. Like I said, in this case, we're not going to be as brutal. We already at least are a little bit familiar with what's happening. And in this case, we're not going to be doing anything with index.js. I will going to swing back at the end of the video and I'm going to kind of go over why the app is being rendered right now. But at the moment, I would just like to cover what are the imports and exports, as well as how we can use these nice extensions, or at least one of them. And that's going to be this guy, which is going to be very, very useful as you're going to be working. So these are going to be the snippets. But let's start with the imports. And for now, let me close the index.js. I will going to open up the files again, and we're going to head over back to the app.js. And this is where we're going to be still brutal. So we're going to still select everything that is in the app.js, and we're just going to delete it. Because at the moment, we don't know what is a class-based component, which, by the way, is the app.js currently, or at least was. And now let's create our stateless functional component. Again, as always, we know that we need to use the imports, and this is the good news. After this video, we should understand what is happening with the imports. We're going to be looking for React from, and then the dependency is going to be React. Then let's create our component. Let's say const. I will going to name this map, and then I'm going to say that app is going to be equal to, and then in this case, we're not going to be passing anything. We're just going to have some, I don't know, section. So let me make the parentheses. Let's write section, and that's not what I wanted. So let me maybe have the angle bracket, and then let's write section. And then within a section, we're going to have a paragraph of this is my content. Let's do a very simple example. However, I do want to do one thing, which again, we haven't covered yet. But in order for our example to work, at least currently, let's do export, default, and then let's just write app. Again, these names are going to have to match. So this is going to be important. Let me save it. And now everything is going to be working. So why don't we finally take a stab of imports and exports and how they're working and what would be the major benefit of them. Already currently we saw as we were working with our first project that if we're placing, let's say, one component here, then that would be probably a list or something like that. Then we had a list item. Your files are getting more and more clogged. And eventually, as you're passing in more data and all kinds of other information, this is not going to be very useful. The fact that you just have one massive file, it's going to be hard for debugging. It's going to be hard for your structure. And overall, this is going to be really annoying. So there's something called imports and exports where we're working with modules. And you can think of modules as a way of basically having a separate file of having some kind of separate information. So first of all, let me make some comments on the top, which, by the way, I think you're going to find useful. And we have two types of imports. So there's going to be named imports, as well as we're going to have the default imports, or you can also write with exports. It's going to be the same thing. Named and default imports / exports. Okay, so that would be the major thing, that there's going to be two types of them. Then also we're going to have the fact that only one default export per module. And again, you can think of modules as a separate files where you're going to have all kinds of information that you just want to share some of it. Let's say you have your module, then there's going to be some functions, some data, some components, whatever, and you're going to pick what are you going to be sharing. So let me write this. Think of module as a file, So something like this. Now, how are we going to start working with this? Well, we have the source folder, correct? Within the source folder, we have the app CSS, then we have the app.js. So why don't we create a new file and see how the imports and exports would work? And here I'm just going to go with simple file. I'm going to call this data.js. And please understand that we're not going to be covering everything that has to do with imports and exports. There are some few other things like aliases and stuff like that. And for me, I think that it's more important that you understand the general basics and everything that we're going to be using in the course. And if you're interested, or if you see, let's say, some other syntax or something like that, you can always swing back and you can do a little bit more research. So let's say I have my data.js file. In this data.js file, I'm just going to start creating some variables. I'm going to say const name is going to be equal to, let's say, John. Then the age of John is going to be, let's say, 27. So let's say const, and then the age is going to be, let's say, 27. Then what else do you have? Well, we can also create maybe some kind of person. So I'm going to say const person, and then within the person object, I'm going to have instead the name as a key value pair. So name is going to be Peter. And then we're going to be looking obviously for the comma, because this would be a proper syntax. And for the name of Peter, we're going to have 25. So far, so good. Why also we don't create some kind of local variable that's going to serve a purpose of showing you what happens if you don't want to share some kind of information. So let's say local secret, or you know what, let's not do local, but let's do secret value, and let's just call this secret. So what I would need to do right now, if I would want to use this information in my app, let's say, I can use it anywhere I want. Please understand that just because we're going to be using the app.js as our example doesn't mean that we can only use it with app.js. This is going to work all throughout our application. So let's say I'm interested in name, age, and person, but I don't want to use this secret value. So what we can do is something called named imports and exports. So in this case, what would happen is I would need to add export keyword here right in front of whatever my data structure that I have. In my case, this is just going to be simple variable, but in this case, I'm going to say export, and then we're going to copy and paste it as well right here, as well right here. But secret value, I'm going to leave it off here. And then you're going to obviously see that we're not going to be able to access this. So let's imagine this would be some kind of secret value that we're just using in the data.js. In order to use this with the named imports that we have right now, named imports, exports. And by the way, if I just say one import named or something like that, please understand that that means both of them, whether named imports or exports or just named imports, it would work exactly the same. So let's say right after the importing from React, I'm going to write import, and then I'm going to be looking for my values. Since these values are right now named, meaning I would specifically need to choose them, the syntax would be like this, where I have the curly braces. Then I need to go for exactly the same names. And this is important. With a default value, this is going to be a little bit different, but with a named exports, you need to make sure that they actually match. So in this case, I'm going to say name, age, and person. And now I'm going to be looking where from. And in this case, we are using something called a relative path, where if this is going to be in the same folder, then I can just say dot and then /. And now this gives me right away suggestions. Do you want this from the app test, data, and index, or service worker, of course? And in our case, obviously, we're looking for the data. And like I said, the difference would be between the CSS files that you would need extensions, as well as the same is going to work with images. You're going to need to have the file extension. However, with a JavaScript files, you don't need this. So you're just going to have data and that's it. So now in this case, we can just save it. At the moment, nothing is happening, but these are the variables that we can use. So why don't we test it out? Why don't we say that there's going to be more paragraphs? And then in each of the paragraphs, we're going to write name, and then let me copy and paste it, and let's type age. So first of all, we're going to see that everything's working. I have John, and you have 27. Now let me show you what happens if you're going to be trying to render the object, which will going to happen actually on some cases, at least as you're working with React. I think especially in the beginning, where you might see this example or meaning error that is going to spit you back. So let's see what happens with an object. And for this, I would like to open the console. You can also open up the integrated terminal. It's going to do the same thing. And let's say I'm not going to be looking for elements. I'm going to be looking for the console. And at the moment, it just says, okay, so person is not used and the secret value is assigned. But again, we're not using it. And that's fine. We can live already with these warnings because we understand that this is not going to break our application. However, something that will going to break our application is going to be something like this. So we already know that, okay, we have named imports and exports, and I can just access these values all over my application. However, with an object, please be careful. The moment I'm going to save it, notice what happens. So I have a big fat error. And the reason for that, because we cannot do this, because we cannot render objects like that. Obviously, if we want to render keys from the object, we are allowed to do that. So let's say in this case, I'm going to have two options, age or name, because this is what is in my object. So in this case, once I'm going to render, everything's going to be fine. And I'm going to be looking for the P there. Also, understand that I'm just using right now the variables and the object, but we can use the arrays, which by the way, we're going to do throughout our tutorials and projects, as well as we can use functions, we can use utilities, we can set up the CSS, and I can go on and on and on and on. The main purpose of this video is for you to understand that you can share the information throughout your application using the exports and imports. And this gives you a structure where you can separate your concerns. Let's say in one file or folder, you're going to keep some kind of information. Then in the other one, you're going to keep some other type of information. So let's say you need debugging. This is going to help you where you're like, okay, you know what? I need to run back to the data. I don't have to run to the app.js where the whole information is right here. So good luck finding it. So this really saves you a lot of time and a lot of energy, especially if you put your mind to it as you're structuring your applications. However, notice, since this is not shared, the secret value, we are not accessing here. Even though I would type here secret value, nothing. I can try to use it, but I'm going to get undefined. So let me copy and paste it. I'm not going to be looking for a person. And let's say secret value. Hopefully you can see that the name is exactly the same. However, it's saying, well, the secret value is not exported, buddy. What are you looking for? So that is important. You only are accessing whatever you're exporting, not everything that is in the file. However, we also have another option how we can do this. So let me first comment this out. So let's say something like this. And let me show you right away some other ways how we can do this. And by the way, let me get rid of the secret value. Maybe this is just going to throw you off a little bit. So that would be one way. And in order to work with our next example, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste it. And I'm going to comment this out. Again, this is just going to be for your future reference. So you understand that, let's say if you're doing this way, this is how you're accessing the values. But I'm going to show you another way how you can import. And that would be using import. And then we have this wild character of asterisk, as this would mean everything that's being exported. And here we can give it an alias. So in this case, if I could just say data, and again, I can name this orange. It doesn't really matter. You're probably already sick of me saying that, but anyway, this is how it's going to work. So we are exporting everything that is being exported, or I'm sorry, importing everything that's being exported as data. And then we're again looking from where. So here I'm going to say from. Again, we have dot / and then again, the thing is going to be data. However, the difference here is going to be very simple. If I'm going to say it, notice I have age, person, and all of them are not defined. Now, the reason for that is, first of all, it's going to be two reasons, because I copy and pasted actually 2 times. That's not what I wanted, so my apologies. So let me first delete it, but the same result is going to be here. And the reason for that result is that we are importing here everything as data. So in order to access it, this is going to be exactly the same how we work with an object, where we have data dot, then we have data dot age, then we have also data dot, and you obviously hopefully understand what's happening, that everything we can access here with this variable that we had. So if you did name this orange, then obviously you're going to be accessing here as well as being an orange. So that would be something that I would want to show you. I also would want to show you one more thing. So let me again comment this out just so you can see that this would be an option. And again, I'm leaving this purposely for your reference so you understand how this would work. And I know there's kind of a bunch of comments, but I find it a little bit useful than me just deleting it, because I think that way at least you can go back and you'd be like, okay, so this is how it worked with as we're importing everything, and this would work as we're having just selective imports. And in this case, let me again comment this out. So I'm going to say it like this. And now let's change something in the data. So we're not limited to having this kind of syntax. So in this case, again, let me copy and paste it. So I'm going to say all these 4 values are going to be exactly the same. However, we're going to change around a little bit, as well as I'm going to still comment out for your future reference. And now let me delete all these exports. Let's say something like this. So there's going to be cases where you're going to see something like this, which, by the way, again, does exactly the same thing. That is the reason why I comment this out, just so you see that it would work in a similar fashion, where I can just say export. Then the syntax would be the curly braces, and then we can just name whatever we're exporting. Name, age, person. And sure enough, nothing breaks because everything works exactly the same way. So you can either do it this way, where you're exporting one by one, or you can do something like this. So that would be named imports. Again, there's a little bit more to it. You can do some aliases right here and all that, but I really don't want to clog your head, because in most cases, we're going to be using either simple named exports as well as simple default exports. So if I would be you, I probably wouldn't worry about it too much, as long as you understand that everything that we're going to be naming, obviously, is going to be imported and exported. So in this case, we could have had the secret value if we wanted. We wouldn't be limited to that. However, here, of course, this wouldn't work in general because we explicitly need to use the export. That's just would be a side note. Okay, what else we have? Why don't we have a look at a default export, how it would work, as well as why don't I throw you a little mind grenade and we set up a new folder. So within the source, I'm going to say there's going to be a new folder, and I'm going to call this components. And within the components, let me create another folder. I didn't have to technically do it, but let's just do it anyway. We're going to have another folder. Well, we're going to have, I don't know, header. And in this case, within the header, let's create another file in this case, but this is going to be a component, and a common practice would be naming your components with capital letter. So in this case, I'm going to say banner.js. What I would want in a banner? Well, I could create our typical component that we have been creating, the functional state component, by again typing everything out, import, React, yada, yada, yada. However, now I would like to show you the neat and awesome extension, which would be this guy. This would be the React snippets. And at this point, as you're looking at the documentation, you should already start understanding what's happening. Because, of course, we haven't covered everything, but we already have covered enough things so you can start being like, okay, I kind of understand at least the general idea here. And the idea is very simple. The idea is that I can, let's say, if I want components, and at the moment, don't look at this class component. We were going to cover it very shortly. However, as you're looking at a RFC, which, by the way, let me just scroll down a little bit. This is going to be a bunch of them, but as you're looking at this guy, what do you see? So there's an import from React. Okay, so far so good. And then we have this export default, which we're going to talk about literally in a second. And then you have your function. So what's happening is, instead of every time running back to your keyboard and import from React and do all this and that, what we can do is we can just type RFC and we're good to go. And that's it. That's all we have to do. So let me show you how this is going to work. And by the way, this is again going to work The same with class-based components, which we're going to cover again in the following videos. But the only thing I need to do is do this RFC, and that's it. I have my function. The name is going to match, by the way, right away, the file name. I have my imports. I have this set up as a default. So in this second, we're exactly going to talk about it. And let's write something here. Let's say hello, or you know what? Let's do heading 1. This is going to stand out. Hello from Banner, my friends. So I'm going to save it. So far, so good. Everything is working fine. I can just close this. I don't need that. And then I'm going to swing back again to the app, and I would like to import this. However, with default, there's two things. First of all, there can be only one default export from the module or from the file, as well as with the default one, I can rename this whatever I want, in the sense that if I'm going to head over back to imports, and I'm just going to like to do it here in the app.js, and if I'm going to say import, if I'm going to write orange and then I'm going to be looking for the file, I just need to use this variable. Common sense obviously would be naming this exactly what you're exporting. So if you're exporting as a banner, even though you're exporting this as a default, now let me show you what happens in the index.js. As you see that in the app, we're also doing the same thing. We're saying export, default, and then we're saying what we're exporting. We're not naming it here. We're just saying, okay, I would like to export this app. However, in the index.js, this is where we're importing. And by the way, as you're looking at it, you can see that a lot of things that we did in the previous video are exactly the same. There's few more additions like index CSS. There's the service worker that we don't care about, but we have React DOM, then we are rendering. What we're rendering is the app. Now we are getting the app from the default export. And in this case, we're importing this and we're naming this app. However, like I said, I could have named this orange and also named this guy orange. Now, this is important. They do need to match. But the moment I save it, nothing happens. So my application doesn't break. And the reason is very simple, because this is default export. However, again, the common practice would be naming at least similar to what you're exporting. So unless you are, again, a true rebel, I would suggest at least staying with like a common practices. So let me finish here with an app.js. So like I said, I could name this orange, but why don't we stick to everything? And I need to say banner. And the difference you see over here. So with the named exports, imports, I needed to name them. In this case, I'm picking and choosing my value right now. So here I'm going to be looking again for the banner. However, the difference is, again, the banner is going to be kind of nested, right? Because we had the components, the header. So why don't we start looking for it? And again, the way we look for it is very similar. So we have here dot, then we're going to be having the /, then I'm going to be looking for the components, then I'm going to be looking for the header, because obviously that is my folder structure. And then within the header, we're going to have our banner. So all this long line, and now finally we have the banner. So why don't we head over to our section that's being rendered, and we're just going to say banner. And in this case, what we're having is right away the banner. And what else I would like to show you? I think that in the banner, why don't we try it out to get, again, the data? Remember, we could access also the data from the banner. It's not was just app.js. However, in this case, again, the importing, the path is going to be a little bit different, because now we're looking from this file and we're looking all the way to the data, which is technically right next to the app.js. So how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, I think are doing not the default, but we're doing the name export. So in this case, why don't we do import? Then in this case, I'm just going to be looking for name. It's going to work exactly the same with the rest of them. But the main purpose here is to show you the path. So the path would work like this. So we have from, then we have what? Well, now in this case, this is not going to be in the same folder. So now we have to use 2 dots. So this was the reasoning why I was showing you how we would do this from this folder. So now we're looking in the header, but obviously we already know that this is not going to be in header. So we can delete this, and we need to say, no, you need to go 1 folder up. So in this case, where this is going to be? Well, that is going to be already in the components. Now within the components, then we have the data. So basically what happens is that I'm not going to be looking in the same folder. This is not going to be in header, as well as this is not going to be in the components. This is going to be, in fact, in the source. So that way you're doing this dot, then you're leaving the folder, again, dot dot, then you're leaving the folder. And then finally you reach the point eventually, obviously, where you're getting to the data. So in this case, let me just test it out. I'm going to say that I'm going to be looking for the name. So hello from banner, and then I have a John. So I know that everything is working out. So again, in short, named and default exports, then there's going to be only one default export. In most cases, this is what's going to happen. You're just going to create a component and the RFC. So let me give you this suggestion. So RFC is going to be functional based component. Class based component is going to be RCC, which we will going to cover a little bit later. And then the right away syntax is going to be something like this, but we can also rewrite this, of course. And the syntax would be following. Let me again do the same thing like we did before. Let's comment this out. So that would be one option. That's going to be the default one that the snippet is going to give you. However, we could have written this also like this, where we have the function, of course, and then we're looking for the name, let's say banner, and we could have copied and pasted, but a little bit of typing is not going to hurt us. And then in this case, we're going to do the same thing like it is in an app, where we have default, and then we're looking for the banner. So what I'm saying is I'm going to be exporting this as a default, and the name of my export is going to be banner. So let me copy and paste it here. I'm going to comment this out, and that should do exactly the same thing where I don't have the errors. So in short, this would be exports and imports, as well as our snippets extension in our React application.